The call came at 6:47 the morning. I remember the exact time because I had just set my coffee down on the counter and was watching the steam curl up toward the kitchen light, thinking about nothing in particular. It was a Tuesday. The kind of quiet Tuesday that doesn't warn you before it turns your entire life upside down. My brother's name flashed across my screen. We hadn't spoken in 4 months. Not since Christmas, when he'd made a comment at the dinner table about how Dad's house was too much property for one old man to maintain, and I'd told him to his face that Dad was 67, not dead. He hadn't liked that. His wife had liked it even less. I answered anyway. "Dad had a stroke," he said. "No hello. No how are you?" Just that, delivered like he was reading off a grocery list. My heart dropped straight through the kitchen floor. "When? How bad? Which hospital?" 3 days ago." He paused. "I've been handling everything. 3 days. My father had a stroke 3 days ago and my brother was just now telling me." I gripped the counter with my free hand. "Why didn't you call me the moment it happened?" "Because," he said, and I could hear his wife murmuring something in the background, coaching him. "You would have made it about yourself. You always do. Dad and I talked about this. He made me his emergency contact last year. I have medical power of attorney." I didn't know that. I hadn't known that. "I want to see him." "Which hospital?" "He's not in a hospital anymore. He's been transferred. There's a really excellent memory care facility in Dunmore, Pinehaven. It's 40 minutes from here. He'll be comfortable." Memory care. My father, who read 3 newspapers a day, who did the crossword in pen, who had called me 2 weeks ago to recommend a documentary about Byzantine architecture because he thought I'd find it interesting. "He doesn't need memory care," I said. "He had a stroke. The stroke affected his cognition." Another pause. A longer one this time. "Look, I know this is hard to hear. It's hard for me too. But I'm his legal guardian now. The court approved it last week. Dad is in good hands, and I need you to trust me on this. Legal guardian. Court approved. Last week. He's not mentally incapacitated," I said. The words came out slow and careful, the way I'd learned to speak when something wasn't adding up. I worked as a paralegal at a small family law firm. I knew what guardianship proceedings looked like. I knew how long they were supposed to take. A court doesn't approve guardianship in a week. That's not how the process works. It does when there's a medical emergency and a qualified physician submits a declaration. He didn't miss a beat. He'd rehearsed this. Dad's doctor submitted the paperwork. Everything was done correctly and legally. "I'm sorry if that's not what you want to hear. I want to see him." "That's not a good idea right now. He needs to settle in." The staff at Pinehaven say that outside visitors in the first few weeks can be disorienting for patients. Outside visitors. He called me an outside visitor. I'm his daughter. And I'm his son and his legal guardian, which means I make decisions about his care. If you want to visit, you can submit a request, and I'll consider it. Another pause. Deliberate. Satisfying to him. Also, I should probably tell you Dad asked me to handle his estate while he recovers. I had his power of attorney notarized before the transfer. The house went on the market Monday. We already have an offer. The house my father had lived in for 31 years. The house where my mother had hung wind chimes on the back porch that were still there, still chiming, long after she was gone. He would never agree to sell that house. He did. He signed the listing agreement himself. A small sound, almost a laugh. "Look, I hate to be blunt, but you should know Dad updated his will last year too. He left the estate to me. The house, the accounts, the investment portfolio, all of it. You were taken care of when Mom passed." Dad felt the situation was balanced. I said nothing. "There's no point in making this ugly," my brother continued. "Dad is being cared for. The estate is being handled. You can move on with your life. I really think that's what's best for everyone." Then he hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The coffee went cold. Outside, a car passed on the street and a dog barked somewhere down the block. Normal sounds. Normal Tuesday sounds. Except nothing was normal anymore. Here is what my brother did not know about me. He knew I was younger than him by 6 years. He knew I'd always been closer to our father, that we called each other every Sunday without fail, that Dad had driven 8 hours to help me move into my apartment when I was 24. He knew those things and had always held them against me, quietly, the way some people carry resentment like a stone in their pocket. What he did not know was that I had spent the last 5 years working for a firm that handled, among other things, contested guardianships and elder financial abuse cases. I had sat across from families torn apart by exactly this kind of situation. I had watched attorneys pull apart fraudulent documents piece by piece. I had learned, because my job required it, every step of the process, what proper guardianship filings looked like, what a forged signature looked like, what an expedited court proceeding that skipped required notifications to interested parties looked like. I knew what it looked like. I poured my cold coffee down the drain and picked up my phone again, but I didn't call my brother back. I called my father's cell phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. His voice on the recording, familiar, warm, a little formal the way he always was on recorded messages, made my chest tighten. I hung up and tried again. Voicemail. I sent a text. Nothing. I called Pine Haven Memory Care in Dunmore. The woman who answered was pleasant. She confirmed that a patient by my father's name had been admitted. She said she could not provide information about patients to non-authorized contacts. When I asked who the authorized contacts were, she said she wasn't able to share that either. I asked if I could speak to the admitting physician. She said she would pass along a message. I drove to Pine Haven that afternoon. The facility was tucked behind a row of oak trees off Route 9, a long beige building with manicured hedges and a security keypad at the front entrance. I pressed the call button and explained who I was. A staff member came to the door and told me, apologetically, that my name was not on the approved visitor list and she was not able to grant access without authorization from the patient's guardian. I asked if my father knew I was there. She hesitated. Then she said she would let the care team know I had come by. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. I watched a man in scrubs wheel an elderly woman toward a garden path on the side of the building. I watched the oak trees move in the wind. Then I drove home and I started working. The first thing I did was pull the county court records. Our firm had access to the public filing system, and guardianship proceedings, once finalized, became part of the public record. I searched my father's name. The filing was there. Petition for appointment of guardian, submitted 8 days ago, signed by a Dr. Raymond Oakes. Supporting medical declaration. Stroke with resulting moderate cognitive impairment. Patient unable to manage personal affairs. I wrote down Dr. Raymond Oakes. Then I searched Dr. Raymond Oakes in the State Medical Board database. His license was current. He was listed as a general practitioner with a practice address in Millhaven, 40 minutes from my brother's house. I searched his name alongside my brother's town. His name appeared in a local neighborhood association newsletter from 3 years ago. He and my brother had served on the same HOA landscaping committee. I sat back in my chair. My father's own physician was a cardiologist at Street Emmanuel Medical Center, where he had been a patient for 11 years. His name was not Dr. Raymond Oakes. He had never mentioned a doctor. Raymond Oakes, and a general practitioner with an HOA connection to my brother, had somehow submitted the medical declaration that stripped my father of his legal autonomy in under a week. I called my father's actual cardiologist's office first thing the next morning. I identified myself, explained the situation, and asked if Dr. Halloran had been contacted or consulted in relation to my father's recent medical situation. The receptionist put me on hold. When she came back, she said Dr. Halloran had not been made aware of any stroke, had not been contacted by any facility, and had not received any records transfer request. Can you tell me when his last appointment was? I asked. She checked. 6 weeks ago. Routine follow-up. Dr. Halloran's notes indicated my father was in good health. Good health. 6 weeks ago. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called the county clerk's office and requested a copy of the guardianship filing, including all supporting documents. I drove over that same afternoon to pick them up in person. I sat in my car outside the courthouse and went through every page. The medical declaration from Dr. Oakes described a patient who had suffered a significant ischemic stroke resulting in marked cognitive decline, including impaired judgment, memory loss, and inability to manage daily affairs or financial decisions. It described a man who could not remember what day it was, who could not recognize family members, who required 24-hour supervised care. This was not my father. This was not the man who had called me 2 weeks ago, clear and sharp and enthusiastic, to talk about a documentary on Byzantine architecture. There was also a signature page, my father's signature, authorizing the guardianship petition. I looked at it for a long time. I had grown up watching my father sign things: report cards, permission slips, birthday cards, the deed to the house when they'd bought it in 1993. His signature was distinctive, a large, deliberate capital W, the rest of the letters trailing off in a particular slope. I had seen it hundreds of times. The signature on this document had the right shape. But the pressure was wrong. The slope was slightly off. The trailing letters were too neat, like someone had practiced it carefully but couldn't replicate the unconscious looseness of the real thing. I photographed every page. That evening, I called the attorney at our firm who handled elder law cases and asked her to look at what I had. She called me back 2 hours later. Her voice was careful and measured, the way it got when she was working through something serious. "The timeline alone is problematic," she said. "Proper guardianship proceedings require notification to interested parties, including adult children. There's no record of you being notified before the filing was approved." I wasn't. That's a due process violation. And if the medical declaration was submitted by a physician who has a personal relationship with the petitioner, that's a conflict of interest that could void the entire proceeding. A pause. "I want to file an emergency petition to contest the guardianship. But first I need to know, is there any possibility your father is actually incapacitated?" "No," I said. "He called me 14 days before my brother claims he had a stroke. He was completely himself." "Do you have records of that call?" I pulled up my phone. The call log. 14 days ago, 6:23 p.m., 41 minutes. I screenshotted it and sent it to her. "Good," she said. "We're going to need his medical records from Street Emanuel. We're going to need a declaration from Dr. Halloran. And we're going to need an independent medical evaluation, someone who can actually assess your father's cognitive state. My brother won't allow it. He controls access. If we get a court order, he doesn't have a choice." She filed the emergency petition the next day. What happened next took 3 weeks. 3 weeks that felt like 3 months. My brother hired an attorney, a sharp one, and they fought the petition on procedural grounds. They argued that the guardianship had been properly approved, that the medical declaration was valid, that I was a disgruntled family member attempting to interfere with legitimate care decisions. I kept working. I found that the listing agreement for my father's house had been signed 8 days before the guardianship petition was approved, meaning my brother had listed the house before he legally had the authority to do so. I found that 2 wire transfers had been made from my father's primary checking account in the week after the guardianship was granted, totaling just over $40,000, to an account that turned out to belong to my sister-in-law's LLC. I found that Dr. Raymond Oakes had received a payment of $8,000 from that same LLC 3 weeks before submitting the medical declaration. I found all of this the same way I found everything. Slowly, methodically, one document at a time. Working at my kitchen table after midnight, cross-referencing bank records we'd obtained through the court process, following every thread until I could see the whole picture. When I laid it out for our attorney, she was quiet for a moment. "This isn't just a fraudulent guardianship," she said. "This is elder financial abuse, potentially criminal." "I know. I'm going to need to loop in the DA's office." "I know that too." What neither of us knew yet was what condition my father was actually in. 3 weeks inside a memory care facility, cut off from everyone who loved him, with no one to advocate for him. I thought about him every day. I thought about whether he was frightened, whether anyone had told him I was trying to get to him, whether he thought I had simply let this happen. The court granted our petition for an independent medical evaluation on a Thursday morning. The evaluation was scheduled for the following Monday. My attorney informed my brother's attorney. By law, they had to allow access. My brother called me that Sunday night for the first time since the morning he'd delivered the news. His voice was different now. Not smooth. Not rehearsed. "This is going too far," he said. "You're going to tear this family apart." "You started that," I said. "Dad is not well. He's deteriorating. The staff at Pine Haven says he's been declining these past few weeks. I don't think an evaluation right now is in his best interest." He said the word declining carefully, like he was placing it somewhere for me to find. Then the evaluation will reflect that, I said. I'm asking you to stop. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. I was trying to protect Dad. I was trying to handle a crisis that you couldn't be bothered to handle because you're always too wrapped up in your own life too. I'm going to stop you there, I said. Because in that moment, I was looking across the table at my father. He was sitting in a corner booth at Clara's Diner on Merchant Street, wearing his gray cardigan, holding a coffee cup with both hands the way he always did. He'd ordered scrambled eggs and wheat toast. He'd complained that the coffee wasn't as good as his own, and I'd told him he was right. It wasn't. He had laughed. His eyes were clear. His hands were steady. He had told me, in detail, about a legal thriller he was halfway through, and had asked thoughtful questions about my case, and had gotten visibly angry when I walked him through everything that had been done in his name, and then had taken a long breath and said, quietly, well, I suppose we handle it. The independent evaluator had quietly arranged to meet us somewhere my brother didn't know about first, a precaution, given the circumstances. The official evaluation at Pinehaven would happen tomorrow, with documentation, but tonight, we were just sitting in a diner. You're worried about my best interest? I said to my brother. I'm looking out for his best interest, and I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up. My father looked at me over his coffee cup. Was that him? Yes. He nodded slowly. He sounded rattled, from the look on your face. He did. Good. He picked up his toast. He should be. The next morning, I arrived at Pinehaven at 9 o'clock with my attorney, the independent neurologist, and 2 people I had not mentioned to my brother's legal team, a detective from the County Economic Crimes Unit and an assistant district attorney named Miss Torrance, who had reviewed the financial documents and had some questions of her own. My brother was already in the lobby when we arrived. His wife stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression arranged into something meant to look like concern. Their attorney was on my brother's other side. When he saw our group, something moved across his face that he quickly tried to suppress. He looked at me. What is this? This is an independent medical evaluation, my attorney said pleasantly, as authorized by the court order filed last Thursday. We also have some colleagues here who'd like to speak with you about a few financial matters. Separately. I'm not talking to anyone without— Your attorney is right here, Miss Torrance said. That's fine. We can do this with him present. What happened over the next 2 hours, I will not pretend was simple or clean. My brother maintained, for a while, that everything had been done properly. His wife said nothing at all, which turned out to be the smarter choice. Their attorney kept whispering to my brother, and you could see him recalibrating with every new piece of information that was laid in front of him. The neurologist completed his evaluation in 40 minutes. He found no evidence of cognitive impairment. He found a man who was oriented to time, place, and person, who demonstrated intact memory, clear reasoning, and appropriate affect, and who stated calmly and without hesitation that he had not willingly consented to placement in the facility and had not understood what he was signing when the papers were put in front of him in the hospital the week after his stroke. A mild cardiac event that had been real, but had lasted less than 24 hours, and from which he had recovered without any cognitive effects. My father was, in the neurologist's clinical language, fully competent to manage his own affairs. Dr. Oakes's declaration was, in the same clinical language, inconsistent with any reasonable assessment of this patient's actual condition. The guardianship was dissolved by emergency court order at 11:43 that morning. The house sale was halted. The listing had not yet closed, and the court order froze all transactions related to my father's assets pending the criminal investigation. The $40,000 transferred to my sister-in-law's LLC became Exhibit A. My brother and his wife did not leave voluntarily. My brother, in fact, became loud in the lobby of Pinehaven Memory Care. He made statements about family loyalty and ingratitude and the enormous personal sacrifice he had made managing everything. Statements that were, I noticed, without any particular satisfaction being witnessed by the facility's front desk staff, 2 other families in the waiting area, and Detective Ruiz, who was recording the interaction on his phone. His attorney put a hand on his arm and said something low and urgent, and my brother went quiet. My father was waiting in the family consultation room down the hall with my attorney. I walked in and closed the door behind me, and we just looked at each other for a moment. Is it done? He asked. Your guardianship is dissolved. The assets are frozen. They're going to be charged. He let out a long breath. Not relief exactly. Something more complicated, grief, maybe, mixed with it. Because whatever my brother had done, he was still my brother. And my father had loved him the way parents love children even when they shouldn't anymore. How long was I going to be in here? He asked. I had thought about this. I had thought about what the plan must have been. Dad in a facility, declared incompetent, unable to contest anything, while the house sold and the accounts drained, however long it would have taken. I don't know, I said honestly. He nodded. He reached over and put his hand over mine on the table, the way he had done when I was small, and we sat there for a little while without saying anything. 3 months later, my brother was indicted on 5 counts: elder financial abuse, fraud, conspiracy, filing false court documents, and misappropriation of funds. His wife faced 3 counts. Dr. Oakes surrendered his medical license and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced charge. My father moved back into his house. The sale had been completely unwound. The $40,000 was recovered and returned to his account. The wind chimes on the back porch were still there, exactly as he'd left them. On a Sunday morning in October, I drove out to visit him. He made coffee, real coffee, better than Clara's diner. He was right about that, and we sat on the back porch and listened to the chimes, and he told me about the next documentary he'd found, something about the Silk Road, and asked if I'd have time to watch it and call him after. I told him yes, I'd make time. I thought about my brother, somewhere on the other side of all of it. I thought about my sister-in-law, and Dr. Oakes, and the HOA landscaping committee, and the $8,000, and all the small, careful pieces of a plan that must have seemed, at some point, like it might actually work. I thought about the moment my brother had called me on that Tuesday morning, confident and deliberate, to tell me my father was gone from our lives and there was nothing I could do about it. I thought about sitting in my kitchen, the coffee gone cold, not crying, not panicking, just thinking, because here is something my brother had never understood about me. In all the years of knowing me, he thought that because I was quieter than him, I was less. He thought that because I didn't argue at dinner tables, I would not argue at all. He thought that because I had spent years working behind the scenes pulling documents, reading filings, cross-referencing records, I was support staff in someone else's story. He had never once considered that I was taking notes. My father refilled my coffee cup and sat back down and watched the oak tree at the edge of the yard drop one red leaf, and then another. You know what I keep thinking about? He said. What? When you called me? The night of the evaluation. You were at Clara's already when you answered him. Yes. You didn't tell him. No. He shook his head slowly, and there was something in his expression I recognized, not just pride, but a kind of quiet vindication, as if some long-standing argument had finally been settled. You just smiled, he said. I just smiled, I agreed. The wind moved through the chimes, and they rang softly, the sound carrying out over the yard the way it always had, the way it would keep doing for a long time after this day was over, and this chapter was closed, and my father was still here, still himself, still sitting on his own back porch on a Sunday morning drinking his own coffee. Some things, it turns out, you cannot simply take from people, not if someone is paying attention. And I had been paying attention the whole time.